Good morning again, everybody. So thank you for joining our boot camp. So I'll start the session. Uh, First, I'll share my screen. So is my screen visible? I hope so.
Yes.
Okay. So first, I'll start with how to open Google Colab. So if you have a Google account or if you have a Gmail account, so if you go to Google and write Google Colab, then you should be able to navigate to the Google Colab notebook. So Google Colab is basically a online online platform to run Python. There are many ways to run Python. You can run it locally in your computer by Anaconda shell, or you can use several online platforms. So since Google Colab is the most available and as per my opinion, it's the easiest to use, we'll be using Google Colab. So in order to start, we'll go to a file and then new notebook that will essentially create a new Colab notebook. So first, I will go over our agendas for today. So our agendas include first is introduction to Python, and next we'll go over some fundamental concepts of data science with Python, and next I will introduce analytics, and during the last couple of hours Divas will talk about some introduction and implementation of different machine learning models. So this is our agenda for today, and so the first module is about introducing Python. Sorry, introduction to Python. So before jumping into the introduction of Python, we need to know like what is Python. Python is basically a object-oriented high-level programming language which is widely used, and generally dynamic semantics is used with this Python programming language. And this programming language was first created by Guido van Rossum, and it was released at around 1991. So while many of you may know that Python is a large snake, but the name Python programming language actually comes from an old BBC television comedy. I think the name of the series was Monty Python's Flying Circus. That was not really relevant, but it is like an introduction to how the name Python came to place. So in order to start learning Python, first we'll learn how to use the print function. So if we want to print anything to our Python notebook, how do we do it? We simply write print, and then we write whatever we want to print inside it. So if we write print hello world, the notebook will essentially create hello world. Similarly, we can print certain numbers as well. We can print 1, we can print 2, or we can print certain booleans as well, like true, false, etc. So now we know about the print function, but now we need to know that how to save a Python file. So you can see that this is a Google Collaboratory notebook, and what if you want to save this and you want to run it later in your local computer? So you go to file, and then you go to save. Either you can do save or you can do save as. If you do save, it will directly save. or you can do save as, where you will be able to actually determine that which format you want to save your Python file in. It can be either in .ipnyb, as you can see here. So .ipnyb is basically used for Jupyter Notebooks and Google Colab. So Google Colab is basically a platform for to run Jupyter. But the common use is to use the extension .py. You can also save this file using the extension .py. So basically, I'll write how to store a Python file. I mean, you can either you can use .ipnyb to store it, or you can use .py as your extension to store it. Okay, and next we'll try to go over the different data types that are available in Python. Okay, yes. I'll talk about some primitive data types. Okay, so the first data type that we are going to talk about is integers. So the example of an integer would be 1, 2, 3, and so on. The next kind of data type that we are going to talk about is float. Example of float would be something like 1.1, 2.3, and etc. The next data type that we are going to talk about is strings. Example of such a string would be any word, basically any English word or any word that you can think of. It does not necessarily has to have a meaning. I can write something like this as well. I mean, this is also a string. And the last but not the least is the Boolean data type. Example of that would be true, false, etc. I forgot to change it to a markdown set. Okay. So how can you know that what is the data type of a certain thing? So there are some built-in functions in Python. So although I have not introduced what built-in functions are, built-in functions are basically already embedded in Python, and they increase the usability of this language. It is so by the just like print is a built-in function. Just by writing print, we can print any word or any integer to our Python console. Similarly, we have another built-in function called type. So if we write type of 1, Python will say that it's an integer. Similarly, if we write type of 1.1, Python will say that it's a float. Similarly, if we write AB, Python will recognize it as a string. And let's return the type of true. It will return that it's a Boolean type. And so there is one interesting fact about it. So you can see that if I write type and then true, it will say bool. But if I put this true inside the inverted commas, and if I then run the code, it's a string. So basically what we learn from here is anything we put inside the inverted commas is basically a string. So that is all about the primitive data types. And now we'll be talking about how to assign variables, assign values to a certain variable. Assigning values to a variable. So as what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to create a variable and I'm trying to put something inside the variable. So how would I do it? So let's say x is my variable and I'm trying to put an integer 1 inside it. So if I write x is equals to 1 and then if I write print x, then it will essentially print 1. So similarly, um, we can use different variables to basically store anything. I can store a string as well. So I have created another variable called z, and uh, I'm trying to store hello inside it. So now if I print z, it will print out hello. And similarly, I can store any kind of data type that I have discussed above and store it inside a variable. Now, since now we know that how to create and assign values to variables, we'll move on to mathematical operations in Python. So basically, all the math operators that are available can all be implemented in Python. Although I am going to go over some basic ones like addition, subtraction, multiplication, modulo. Um, so anyway, let's start with addition. Let's consider a variable named, let's say t, and let's put 2 inside that variable. Let's declare another variable named u. Let's put 5 inside it. Now, if we do v, another variable is equals to t plus u, then you can guess what v will actually print out. It will print out 7. That is because t is 2 and u is 5. It is basically adding 2 and 5 and printing out 7. Similarly, we can do another, let's say m. M is equals to t into u. That will basically print out. Print 10. So that will basically print out 10 because of the multiplication. We can do the same thing with divisions as well. So let's do division is equals to u divided by t. It's 2.5. Now, if we check, although u and t were integers, if we check the type of division, you can all guess that it will be a float. It will be the class of this variable will be a float. Apart from divisions, we can also do modulo operation, just like this. Let's say modulo is equals to u divided by t. In mod, it will print basically 2. That is because we are trying to divide 5 by 2, and so that is basically a modulus of this. Similarly, just we cannot we have witnessed how we can do mathematical operations in Python. We can use these operations, mostly many of them, in strings as well. Let's try to do some operation on strings. Operations on, let's say, first name. Somebody's first name is John and the last name is, let's say, Doe. So the full name of that person will be the first name plus the last name. So if we print the full name, you will see it is printing out John Doe, but there is no spaces behind, no spaces between it. That is because how we actually declared full name. So if I want to give some spaces in between these numbers, in between these strings, I can just create a blank string. So now if I print it out, you can see that it is printing out as John Doe. So similarly, we can do some operations for booleans as well. But the boolean operation basically follow the boolean algebra, which many of you might know, I'm assuming. So let's give some example on how to do operations on boolean. So let's consider x is equals to true and y is equals to as true as well, and then let's say z is equals to false. So in boolean we know that there are many kind of operations, and, or, xor, nor. So everything can be done in Python, but so due to the simplicity and the time constraint, I'll only discuss and or. So if we do like this, print x and y, I hope you can guess what it will print out, because x is true and y is true, and since we are doing an AND operation, it should also print true. Okay. Okay, so I forgot to run cell. My bad. Okay, yeah. So if we do x and y, it will print true. Similarly, if we print x and z, since it's the AND operation, it will do false. Similarly, if we print out x or z, since one of the bit is open, since one of the bit is true, it should also give us true, right? Yeah. So that is all about operating on strings. So here we learned about operating on integers, here we learned about operating on strings, and here we have learned about how to operate on booleans in Python. So next we will talk about exponentiation. So exponentiation is basically the common form of exponentiation looks something like this: x to the power y. So this is the common syntax of writing exponentiation. So if I want to write 2 to the power 5, I will write it like this. I print g, give me 32, because 2 to the power 5 is 32. So similarly, we can do any kind of exponentiation, but there is a easier way to do exponentiation that those are very commonly used, just like 10 to the power 5 or 10 to the power 6. So if I'm trying to write 10 to the power 6, what I'll do is I'll write 1, e, and 6. That will give me 10 to the power 6. Now, just like any mathematical operation, we can enforce the precedence of an operation with parenthesis. An simple example would read like this. So in the parenthesis, I'll write 1 plus 3 and I'll try to multiply it by 2. So the result should be 8. Let's see what it gives. It is giving me 8 because it is doing the addition first and then the multiplication. On the other hand, if I write something like this, it should give me 7. That is because it is first doing the multiplication and then the addition. Now we'll talk about comparisons in Python. So let's say we want to check if a certain number is greater than or equal to another number or not. So how will we do it? Let's see what if 1 is less than 10 or not. It says true, and intuitively we can see that it is true as well. Similarly, we can do if 100 is equals to 20 or not. It will be false. So there is an interesting observation here that if we are going to do greater than less than, it is just similar to the mathematical operation we generally do. But when we are trying to put a conditional on a equality like this one, if 100 is equals to 20 or not, we use two equality signs. That basically gives us a Boolean output that it's false. It's not just about numbers, not just about integers or floats or booleans. We can actually compare strings as well. Let's see how that pans out. So I'll write if John is equals to 2 or not. It's false. That is because these strings are not the same. As we can actually chain these comparisons as well. Comparisons how are we going to change the chain the comparison? We can write something like this. We can check if 1 is greater than is equals to 2 and 3 is greater than is equals to both 1 and 2 or not. We can see that this statement is correct. That's why Python is saying that it's true. But if we write something like this, then it will say false. Although the right hand side of this inequality holds, 3 is obviously greater than 1, but the left hand side does not hold. That's why it is giving us false. So next, we'll talk about containers. So now we have already learned how to what are the numbers, what is strings, what is float in Python, but we still don't know how to actually store them inside a data container. So that is what we are going to talk about now. Python has some very good inbuilt data containers, like inbuilt containers in Python. So there are multiple inbuilt containers in Python. So the first item is a list. And the second item that we are going to talk about is a tuple. And the third item that we are going to talk about list, tuple, and dictionaries. So let's start with list. let's start with an example of a typical list. So in a list, we can actually store anything. We can store integers, we can store strings, we can store booleans at the same list. So I'm creating a list li, and this is the notation of creating a list. That is, we put two brackets, and so the first element, let's say will be 4, and the next element, let's say a string zebra, and the last element, let's say a boolean, just to show that a list can store anything. So if I print the list, it will read something like this: 4 zebra true. Now if we print the type of the list, will show that it's a class that is called list, that is inbuilt in Python. So there are some other inbuilt functions to assist with this kind of data types. So we can actually check what is the length of this list by a simple function, length of a list. So just by writing len and putting the name of the list, we can see that there are 3 elements in this list. Next topic would be, now we know that how to make a list, but how to subset from a list. So what if we want to have or locate any one particular data from this list? Let's say we want to have zebra or 4 from this list. So that is what is called subsetting, basically. So basically, we can subset in Python by indexes. And Python, as you may or may not know, use zero indexing. What that means is, although this list has 3 elements, but the indexing always starts from 0. If I do li list 0, it will print out the first element. So the index for the first element is 0. The index for the second element is 1, and the index for the third element is 2. So although I have 3 elements, but my indexes go from 0 to 2. This is a very typical instance in Python, and I think all of you should be very careful about it, because it can create a lot of problems if you are not considering that zeroth element is your first element in the list. So there are other ways of subsetting as well, but I'll still stick to the basics. So let's try to subset the second element. So in order to subset the second element, what I'll do is I'll write li1, and you can see that I have accessed the string zebra from the list li. And there are ways of subsetting the last element of the list. So if I ever want to subset the last element of any list, I'll write li, then in brackets -1. That gives me true. So there are 2 ways of subsetting true. What we can do is, either I can write li2, that will basically return the third element of the list, which is true, and or I can locate the last element from the list, which is true as well. So if I run both of this, you can see that it gives me the same result, essentially. So now we know how to create list, how to store value in a list, and how to subset from a list. But what we don't know yet, how do we add stuff to a list? What if I want to add a dog or false or something to this list? So there is another built-in function to this, add stuff to the end of the list. So first we'll start with adding stuff to the end of the list. Then we'll show that we can add any element to any position in a list. So in order to add anything to the list, we can do li.append, and let's say for this we want to add 7, the integer 7. And now we will print out the list. So we can see that our list has now 4 elements: 4, zebra, true, and 7. That is because I have appended 7 at the end of the list. We can keep on appending, like let's append another number. Let's append 3. Let's print the list out again. So now there will be 5 elements in the list, and 3 will be at the last of it. Okay. This is happening because I have appended 7 2 times. Let me rerun it once more. Yeah, so you can see that there are now 5 elements in the list, and 3, the element that I have added, the latest, is the last element. So now we know how to add, but do we know how to remove? There are basically 2 ways to remove some element from a list. So we'll learn how to remove anything from an end of a list. So if I do list.pop, and then if I print out the list, you can see that the element 3 is no longer there, because we have popped that element and that element is out of the list. We can actually store this variable as well. Let's create a variable called removed element. Removed element is equals to li.pop. Now we are going to print both the resulting list and the removed element. We can see that the resulting list is 4, zebra, true, and the element I removed at last was 7. That is because in the previous, when I ran it previously, I had already removed 3. That's why now this time when I did the pop, it removed 7, and it actually stored that value 7 in this remove element variable. Now we know how to add element to the end of the list and how to delete element from the end of the list. But what if we want to insert insert an element at any desired position in the list? So that is what the next thing is about. The next line of code is about. We will insert an element at any desired position. So what we want to do is we want to insert a string called first at the first position of the list. So how do we do it? So there is another built-in function called insert. So if we do li.insert, then this, you can see that it actually tells you that what to do once you write a function. li.insert gives index and object 2 arguments. So this index is basically says where you want to put this particular object. So I want to add something to the start of the list. So that's why I have put 0 here, and that something will be, let's say, first. Now, if I print the list out, you can see that this string first is attached to the first element of the list. Similarly, we can do insert. Let's say we want to insert something in the third position of the list. I'll literally write something, and let's see how the list looks like. So first for zebra, and in the third position there is something. So that is all about insert. Now let's look at some errors that might happen when you are working with a list. So we know that the length of this list is 5. What if I want to subset the sixth element from this list? It will raise an index error, and it will say that the list index is out of range. I mean, when learning a language, it is important to learn the errors as well. I mean, that will give you a better power to actually troubleshoot your problem. So whenever you see an index error like this, you know that you are doing something wrong while slicing from the list, slicing or subsetting from the list. So that is all about adding, removing items from the list, and basically um, saying that what a list is. Um, the next code is about how to subset multiple elements from a list. So now, till now, we know how to subset only one element from the list. So our list is first for zebra something true, and each time we do this kind of subsetting, we can actually extract only one element from the list. What if our application is something where we want to have more than one values? So before going forward, I want to print the list out just to see what it contains. And let's now say I want to subset the first two elements of this list. So how do I do that? So the syntax to do it is 0 to 2. If I do this, you will see that we got first and fourth. Let me print the list as well. It will be easier to visualize, I guess. Okay, so my list was first for zebra something true, and I want to print the first two elements from the list, first and fourth. That's why this is my syntax for that. So if I do 0 to 2, it will create the first element. So there is another tricky part about it. So you can intuitively you might think that there should be 3 elements, because from the list we are basically subsetting the 0th element, the first element, and the second element. So it should also give us zebra, but you can see that it is not giving us zebra, rather it is only giving us first and fourth. That is because in Python, whenever we do like this 0 to 2, it always considers 0 but never considers 2. It stops just one step before 2. So whenever we do 0 to 2, the list will basically take two values, that is 0 to 1. If we want to subset the first three elements from the list, then we have to do 0 to 3. That will give us first, four, and zebra. That is because the index position, so in the original list, the index position of first is 0, the index position of 4 is 1, and the index position of zebra is 2. And since, like I mentioned, whenever we do 0 to 3, it will only go further to 2. We can see that only 3 of the elements got extracted, the 0th, the first, and the second. So that is all about subsetting the list. And so there are some fancy ways of doing it as well. So let's see what are those. So if we do something like this, list, and we omit the end, we don't put anything from the end. So what it will do is, from the second position, so this is zeroth, this this is zeroth, this is first, and this is second. So from the second position onwards, it will subset everything, no matter how large or how big the list is. Even if the list consists of 1,000 elements, and if I write 2 colon and then I omit the end, then starting from the second element, this will subset all the elements that are available in the list. We similarly can do something with the omit first. So something like this. So if we omit the first element, omit the first command, and then write colon and let's say 3, you can see that it prints first, 4, and zebra. It means that it only prints the zeroth, first, and the second element. Since I mentioned that whatever is on the right hand side of the colon, this does not get considered. Only -1 of this gets considered. So if I have colon n, then my list will only go to n-1. I mean, this might be a bit confusing if somebody is a beginner, but I'm sure that as you start working on Python and as you do more coding, this will become clearer. Now let's try to return a reversed copy of a list. So how do I reverse the existing list? So my existing list is li, and if I write something like this, double colon and -1, you can see that my original list is actually reversed. So my last element was true. Now my first element is true. True, something, zebra, 4, and first. That is how my new list looks like. Okay. So there will be certain applications where you would start with an empty list, empty list, and appending the list to it. That is our next topic of discussion. So in order to create a empty list, it's very easy. You basically just do this. You write empty list and then is equals to something like this. And if you keep on appending to this list, then there will be some values that will be stored. Let's say append 1. And Saturday. And let's print out the empty list now. So now I have appended the list. Now I'll print out how my empty list looks like. Okay, it is not getting printed out for some reason. Anyway, so now you can see that the empty list actually contains 2 elements, 1 and Saturday, like I appended. So you can always create an empty list like this and keep on appending values. And there is a way to automate this as well. So as we go further, as we discuss about how to write a loop and how to write different other data structures, then we'll see that how we can automate this append function. But as of now, this is it. So now we have talked about, we have talked long about list. So now we'll go on to the next inbuilt container, that is tuple. Tuples are not as widely used as lists, but they are very important as well. But there are some typical feature of tuple that makes them different from list. So the main feature of tuples is they are immutable. Immutable means not mutable, not mutable as in they cannot be changed. So if I give you an example, it will be a lot clearer that what I mean. So let's create a tuple. A tuple is 1, 2, and 3. And let's print out my tuple. This is my tuple. So when we were doing list, we were using third brackets. But for this one, we will use first brackets like these ones. And if we print the type of tup, then we'll see that it is of a new class. It is called tuple. So tuples are basically the same as list. I mean, any operation that I have shown in list can be carried out in tuple, but there is a very big difference. Let me show you what is the difference. Let me create another list. Let's So this list has the same element as this tuple, right? So this list, I'll print the list and I'll print type of this list as well. Okay. Okay, so I have created one list and one tuple with the same elements. I mean, just for the just for exemplifying sake, and you can see that this is a list. So what I can do is I can actually mutate this list. Mutate this list as in I can actually change this list. So let's say I don't want my first element to be 1. I just want it to be, let's say, one, some string changed. And now if I print my list, you can see that it says changed 2 and 3 because I have removed one and I have assigned a new variable. I have assigned a new value to that particular position, and now the list reads like this. But for a tuple, I cannot do that. That is because tuples are immutable. So I cannot change a tuple by writing this. You can see that it raises a type error. It says that tuple object does not support item assignment. It means that once you have declared a tuple, although you can add certain elements to it, I mean, you can increase the length of the tuple or dimensionality of the tuple, but you can never mutate the tuple. As in, this tuple already has the values 1, 2, and 3. You cannot change these 1, 2, and 3 wherever their index positions are. I hope it is clear. That is because we are going to move on to the last inbuilt container in Python that we have, that are dictionaries. Dictionaries are very important, are very efficient data types. So when somebody starts like advanced coding in Python, they will use dictionaries more often than lists. Dictionaries basically store mappings. So let me show you how a typical dictionary looks like. This is my text example. So the dictionary actually have two elements. One is the key and other is the value assigned to that key. This might seem a bit overwhelming, but let me give you an example. I think that will be better. Hmm. This is what a typical dictionary looks like. So this first element, one, this is actually my key, and this value one or the integer one is actually the value assigned to that particular key. So why do we do it like this? Because there are certain examples or there are certain applications where we we want to store the data in a more complex data type for the application sake. And in that kind of scenarios, dictionaries can be very useful because hashing or subsetting from a dictionary is relatively easy. So if I do dict example and then one, it will basically give me this number. If I do dict example 3, this will basically give me 6. So dictionary is just like list and tuple. Dictionary is another um, built-in data type, built-in container in Python that we can use to store different data. And there are many other applications of these dictionaries as well. Uh, let me uh, um, let me give you some of them. So if I want to get all the keys from a dictionary, then okay, getting all the keys from a dictionary, then we'll write something like this: date. So you can see that our keys in this dictionary were 1, 2, and 3. And if I do dict example dot keys, it basically gives me 1, 2, and 3. We can actually change these keys to a list as well. We can just write list and then so this basically changed our dictionary keys to a list. I mean, this is just on a need to know basis. So similarly, just like we are getting all the keys, we can get all the values as well. So the code is very intuitive. I mean, that is the best part about using Python. You don't need to remember a lot of syntaxes because most of the syntaxes are basically English. So we can see that if we do dict example dot values, we can actually get all the values from a dictionary. The values from the dictionary that I have created earlier were 1, 2, and 6, and in this example I can get 1, 2, and 6. And just like this, if I do list and then dict example dot values, I can change them to a list. Now they are changed into a list. So now we have known about how to use a dictionary, how to create a dictionary. But what if I want to add another element to a dictionary? That is even easier. That is, there are multiple ways to do it, but I will show you the easiest two way. So what you can do is you can use the update function. you can write like this, update, and then so let's say I want to add 4 as a key, and then the value I'll store under 4 is, let's say, 9. I hope this works. Yeah. Yes, and date example. Yeah. So you can see that I have added another key 4 to this dictionary and another value assigned to that key. There is even another easier way of adding things. That is what we can do is take example and then create, let's say, 5, and we can say 5 is equals to, let's say, 10. And now if we print the example out, you can see that I have this element too. So basically these two lines, line 82 and line 84, they do the same thing. I mean, whichever way you prefer, you can use any one of these to add values to a dictionary. So that is all about the data types. Now we'll try to move on to control flow and iterables. That means we'll talk about lists, that we'll talk about loops and how to iterate over lists and dictionaries and maybe tuples as well, if we have enough time. So let's start with the conditional statements. 5, I hope this is 1.5. Yeah, 1.5, and then iterables. So first we will be talk about conditional statements that are if, elif, and else. So if any of you have some prior programming language, maybe in Java, C++, C#, anything, you must have came across conditional statements. If not, then also there is no need to worry. I'll try to make it as simple as I can. So let's learn how to use conditional statements in Python. First, let me assign something. Let's assign some variable, and let's create some variable, and let's assign the value 6 to that particular variable. We can write a simple conditional statement like this. If some variable is greater than is equals to 6, then print it is greater. Else, let's print not greater. Let's run this cell and see what happens. That is because our sum variable is 6. So when my code enters this loop, first it enters through this, and it checks if what is the value of sum variable. So I have preset my sum variable value to be 6. So when it goes inside the loop, it goes to the if statement, and since the if statement is true, it prints that it is greater. Let's see, what if my sum variable, what if I update the value of sum variable to 0, and now I'll run it again. So you can see that it prints not greater. That is because again with the sum variable value is equals to 0, it enters the loop and the if statement is not satisfied, so it does not print it is greater. It directly goes to the else statement and prints not greater. So there is another thing called elif, which I have not discussed yet. So in if and else, we can only put two conditions. What if I want to put many more conditions inside it? What if I don't want to limit myself to only two conditions? Then we can create elif. Elif some variable is less than 3, then print is less than 3. Okay. So now this is my whole conditional statement. So can any of you guess that what will it print? I mean, you don't have to answer, just like think that what it might print. So it is printing it is less than 3. That is because my sum variable has the value of 0, which is lesser than 3. So this sum variable enters the loop. The if statement does not get satisfied, but whenever it gets to the elif statement, it is satisfied and it directly prints less than is equals to 3. What if my value of sum variable is 4? Then you can see that it prints not greater, because then if my sum variable value is 4, then the elif statement is also not satisfied. It directly goes to the else statement and prints not greater. So in between, you can create as many elif statements as you want and as per your need. So if elif and else are basically all the conditional statements you need if you want to put any kind of conditions on your code. So that was about conditionals, and now let's talk about loops. So the first loop I'm going to talk about is for, and I think for is the most widely used loop. At least in my short career, whatever I have used is mostly for loops and sometimes some while loops, but yeah, let's start with for. So the syntax of for loop is for I in range, let's say 4, int I. So you can see what happens here. This function range is another built-in function which starts with a value 0 and ends the n minus 1th value, like we discussed in the list. That happens because of the zero indexing in Python. So for I in range 4, print I. So it basically shows that what are the values I is taking. So for the first time, so since it is a loop, it means that this print statement will be ran 4 times. So for the first time, the value of I is 0. That's why it is printing 0. And in the next time, the value of I is 1. That's why it is printing 1, 2, and 3 respectively. So there are ways to actually control where we want to start our loop, like this. So I'll copy paste the same code. Let's say I don't want my I to take the value 0. I'd rather want it to start from 1. So this range function also facilitates that. We can write something like 1 comma 4 and then print the same thing, and you can see the difference that it starts with 1 and ends with the n minus 1th value. Similarly, I'll print copy paste this again just to show. So this range built-in function range basically takes 2 arguments, 3 arguments. The first argument is where you want to start from. The second argument is where you want to end. And the third argument is step size. Let's say I want to do step size 2, and let's say this time I want to end at maybe let's say 10. And if I print it out, you can see the first value that I took was 1. The next value that I took was 3. That is because we have specified our step size to be 3. So it is step size to be 2. So basically what it is doing is it is adding 2 to the first element and yielding the next element, reporting the next element to be 3. And then the next element of 3 would be 5, 7, and 9, because 9 is our like upper limit, because here we have said that we want to run this loop from 1 through 10. So whenever, like I'm mentioning it again and again, whenever I say 10, it will actually run to 9 because it always runs to the n minus 1th element. So let me write one thing. Let me write how the range function works. So the range basically has 3 arguments. First is the lower limit, then the upper limit, and last but not the least is the step size. This is how a typical range function looks like. So now we have talked about the for loop, and we'll move on to the while loop. While loops. So as the name suggests, as for, we could control that how many iterations we want to run. That's why we use for. But for while loops, the loop will run while some condition is met or not met. So when I give an example, it will be clear. Let's initialize one variable called x to be 0, and then I'll write while my x is less than, let's say, 4, we will keep on printing x. So if we just write this, this code is not complete. This code will run infinitely. That is because I have already said my value of x is 0. So x is less than 4, this statement is perpetually true, and my loop will run infinitely for until I close this tab. So what we need to do is we need to put a upgradation policy as well when we are using a while loop. So for this case, I'm saying that after each iteration, my x will increase by +1. And now let's see what happens. So you can see it printed 0, 1, 2, 3. So now let's dig deep and let's see what happened inside the loop. So first we opened with x is equals to 0, and then while x less than 4, we'll keep on printing x. So first that's why it printed x, and then we incremented the value of x by +1. So after while loop has ran for one time, the value of x will be 1. That's why it has printed 1. And next time it printed 2, and next time it printed 3. But it stopped printing here. That is because in the next iteration, the value of x was 4. And it does not satisfy this condition that while x is less than 4. That's why the loop stopped running. So this is all about basically while and for loops. And there is one small thing before I end the first half of this session. So let's talk about modules. So there are many pre-built modules in Python. I mean, we don't have the time or the opportunity to talk about all of them, but if you know that how one of them works, you should be able to work with the others as well. So for the time being, we'll work with one library called math. So in order to use a library in Python, first you need to import it. So there is already a pre-built library called math. So I'm just writing import math. So now math is imported to this particular uh, Python file. So in math there are many functions, but for the time being I'll show you one function, that is square root. So if we write math.sqrt and 16, you can all guess what it will print, that is 4. So this is a typical use of math. So this was all about the introduction to Python. Will be sharing this file with you guys once this bootcamp is over. Just to give you the material, if you want to go back and see what you learned from it, this might be a good idea. So we'll take a short recess of like 3 to 4 minutes, and then we'll be back with the next session. So hello everyone. Hope all of you have stayed tuned. And so any of you have any questions regarding the previous session or whatever we have talked till now? I think this will be the right time to ask. I'll try to address your queries and concerns. Okay, if not, then we'll directly move on to the next session, that is fundamentals of data science with Python. So I'll create a new notebook like I did last time, and this will be okay. Okay, so this session will be short. I just want to introduce some basic libraries that we use every now and then in data science, and we'll move on to the next session. So the first library that is widely used is NumPy. NumPy, and NumPy is basically used for creating single dimensional or multi-dimensional data arrays. So now NumPy is a package or a module that is used in almost all numerical computations using Python. Now, it is a package that provides high performance vector, matrix, and higher dimensional data structures for Python. Now, it can be implemented in C and Fortran if some of you have already worked with C or Fortran. So we always want our calculations to be vectorized or formulated with vectors or matrices so that our calculation is faster and the performance is good. So in order to upload NumPy, what we do is just like we did with math, we do import NumPy as NP. So by writing this line of code, we are basically importing NumPy to our notebook. Importing NumPy. And as NP means whenever I'll call NumPy, I don't want to write the whole thing. I just want to write NP. That's why I wrote import NumPy as NP. Now you can do anything. You can do NP, JK, or anything. I mean, any combination of letters or only one letter, depending on your preference. But the general convention is to use NP, so I'll stick to NP. So the first thing we'll do is how to create arrays with NumPy. So there are a number of ways to actually initialize new arrays in NumPy. So one of the ways can be to use a list or a tuple. Or the next way could be using some dedicated array generating functions. And the third option is reading data from files. So first we will go over how to how to create a NumPy array from a list. So here let's do a list and let's make it 1, 2, 3, and 4. So this is my element of the list, and now I can create. Now I'm going to create a NumPy array. Let's name it V array. So V array would be and NumPy array with the values of this list in it. And let's print out V array. Okay, I forgot a parenthesis there. Okay, so you can see that it basically creates the array, and where it contains all the values from the list 1, 2, 3, 4. So you can see that it basically does the same thing. So either I can write this or I can input numbers manually. So with NumPy, all the data structures that we have created by now was like single dimensional. With NumPy, we can actually create matrices as well. So let's create a matrix M. So in order to create a matrix, in order to create any array, this np.array function is always there. So in order to create a matrix, we'll do something like this. So the first row will consist of 1 and 2, and the next row will consist of 3 and 4. Now, if we print M, you can see that I have a matrix with 1, 2, 3, 4 with 4 elements, and they are organized in a matrix format. So basically, what is the difference between these two guys, V array and M? They seem equal. That is because they have the same number of elements, and basically the same elements as well. But V and M are different. Let's see what the type of V is. You can see the type of V is V array and NumPy ND array, and the type of M is also a NumPy ND array. So there is no distinction between them according to their types, but they are different. So how are they different? By their shape. So if we do V array dot shape, we can see that the shape of this array is one dimensional and it has only 4 elements. Similarly, if we do m.shape, we'll see that the shape is 2, 2. It means that the data stored in M has different memory allocation than the data stored in V array. So the data stored in V array, you can also think of it as a matrix as well. But this matrix has only 1 row and 4 columns. So this is basically what this type means. Okay, so that is all about matrix and NumPys. And so there is one important thing about NumPy, and there is a important distinction between NumPy and list. So one might think that I already have a list and I can do all these things in list, so why do I need a NumPy array? So the basic thing is we can do matrix multiplication and different vector calculations using NumPy, but the list does not support that. But there is one drawback of NumPy as well. In list, we did see that a list can store an integer, a boolean, a string at the same data type or at the same list. But for NumPy, that is not true. So we have created a NP array with M that is 1, 2, 3, and 4. So let's say we want to change the first element or this 1 to a string. So we can write something like M00 is equals to, let's say, any string. You can see that we got an value error, and the value error reads that invalid literal for int with base 10 any string. That means that whenever I put integer values in a NumPy array, it always presets the data type to be integer. But here I am trying to input a string in the same NumPy array which consists of integers, which is not allowed, and that's why it is raising this error. We can actually predefine the data type of a certain NumPy array. Let's see how that can be done. NP array. So I'll basically create another NP array. Oh, I can actually copy paste from here. Let's call it M complex, and I can write the data type to be complex, and in M complex you can see that it is in this format: 1 plus 0 into j plus 2 plus 0 into j, where this j part actually means the imaginary part. Since here we don't have any imaginary parts, all the coefficient of the imaginary part is 0. But if you had anything imaginary, then you will have some values for these coefficients. So we have talked about two data types, but there are some commonly used data types. So the commonly used data types are common data types that can be used with this argument d type that we mentioned here are int, float, complex, bool, or object. And there are many more as well, but these are the most common data types that are used. Okay, I don't know why these list items are here. There are other ways of actually generating the NumPy arrays, but due to the time constraint, I think I'm going to skip that part, and I'm going to directly show you how to index and how to slice from a NumPy array. Indexing and slicing from a So we had already created an array. I'll just copy and paste it, or maybe create a new one. Let's create v is equals to np.array, and then 1, 2, 3, 4. So just like lists, we can do v0, and it will give me the first element. So the rest of the slicing and the indexing is exactly like we did in list. But for one-dimensional arrays. But when working in a two-dimensional array like this M, which reads something like this, if now I want to subset the first element of this matrix, I will write something like 0, 0, and it gives me the first element. If I do 0, 1, it will give me the second element. So now what if I want to subset the whole row, not just any number? If I do M0,
then you can see that it gives me the first row. If I do M1, it gives me the second row. So this will be how we subset a whole row. So similarly, we can subset a whole column as well. So this is how we subset the whole row, and similarly, using the same logic, we can subset a column as well. And so I'll skip the linear algebra part, okay? And the next data type that is really important in any kind of machine learning algorithm is pandas. So I'll give a brief introduction about pandas data frame and how to use pandas. So in order to use pandas, first we have to import the libraries. Just like NumPy will do import pandas as pd, and that works. And next, I'll show you how to construct a data frame. I hope that you remember what dictionaries were, because for this example, I'll be converting a dictionary into a data frame, and then in the next example, I'll convert a NumPy array to a data frame. But first, let's start with the dictionary. Let's consider some random dictionary which has the first key as column 1, okay, column 1, and the values assigned to those are 1 and 2, and another key called column 2, which has the elements, let's say 3 and 4. Now we can create a data frame by writing data frame is equals to pd dot data frame of, and we can specify that the data is equals to d. Now if we run it, and now if we print this data frame out, it looks like this. So these are the two columns having 1, 2 and 3, 4 values. Similarly, we can construct data frames from NumPy arrays. So in spite of actually declaring an array before, what we can do is let's do a data frame 2 and pd data frame. Now inside this, let's declare an array. The first element of this array can be 1, 2, 3, 4. And the next element of this array can be 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. Let's see how that looks like. Okay. So this error came, that is because I wrote data frame with the correct spelling, but I did not put the F to be capital. So this you need to be very careful whenever you are writing data frame, or the D and the F is always capital. Then you won't come across any error. Let's print this data frame 2. Let's see how it looks like. So we can see that there are 4 rows, there are 3 rows and 4 columns, and we have created a data frame from NumPy. So that will be all for the fundamentals of data science with Python. We'll be moving on to the next session, that will be introduction to analytics. So if any of you have any questions, queries, or comments regarding the last 2 sessions that we have talked about, please let me know. You will have 5 minutes to wrap your head around it, and if you have any questions, just let me know. Hello again, everyone. So any of you have any questions? If not, then we'll move on to the next session. I'll start sharing my screen again. I hope it's visible. So in this session, we'll be talking about the introduction to data science and analytics. So we'll be talking about what is data science, what are the different parts of analytics, and so on and so forth. So as you can see, the first line reads that data science is an interdisciplinary field that uses scientific methods, processes, algorithms, and systems to extract knowledge and insights from structured and unstructured data. And then we apply this knowledge and actionable insights from data across a broad range of application domains. So let's talk about analytics now. Analytics, I think, oh yeah. So analytics basically consists of 3 parts. First is the descriptive, prescriptive, and predictive analytics. So the descriptive analytics is something that provides information about what happened. What it means is, let's say there is a cyber attack. I mean, there are cyber attacks like every day on some or the other organizations. It is like a very common occurrence. So in the age of internet, there are some positive things and there are some negative things. Maybe cyber attacks and cyber crimes are a battle that we are already losing, and maybe we will continue to lose for some time. But anyway, that is not the topic of our discussion. So let's say there is an cyber attack. So how would a data analyst know that something is going wrong in a large organization or in a large system? So that kind of analytics is called descriptive. So data aggregation, data mining, data visualization are all part of descriptive analytics. So one analyst will do this kind of analytics like data visualization, data aggregation, and then he will find out that, okay, something is wrong here. So maybe that organization or that system is under attack. So that is all about descriptive analytics. The next part that comes is predictive analytics. Sorry, the next part that comes is prescriptive analytics. So prescriptive analytics is all about prescribing decisions and actions in response to the future conditions. So depending on a future condition, how we will behave, that basically is the takeaway from the prescriptive analytics part. And the part that we will be discussing here mostly is the predictive analytics part. That is identifying future possibilities and trend by some statistical or machine learning models. If you guys have heard about regression, classification, all these problems, or even clustering, all these problems are part of this predictive analytics section. So in the left-hand side of my screen, you can see a graph between complexity and value. It means that descriptive analytics, the degree of complexity for the descriptive analytics is less. But as the complexity, the value one can derive from a descriptive analytics is less as well. But for the prescriptive analytics section, it's the most complex kind of analytics, and the value that can get derived from prescriptive analytics is more than descriptive and predictive. So like I mentioned, we'll be mostly talking about predictive analytics. So there are two commonly used terms related to the same field. That is, first is the statistical learning and next is the machine learning. Although I mean they can be used interchangeably, but there is like a very minute difference between them. So whenever somebody says statistical learning, they mean their emphasis, whatever model they have created, their emphasis was on model interpretability and understanding. That means from the model, whatever result they are getting, they want to interpret the results and understand what's going on. But for a machine learning model, the emphasis is more on prediction accuracy and large scale application. So for machine learning, our focus will be mostly having better accuracies, not interpretability or understanding. I mean, having interpretability and understanding is always a plus in any model. But if we are talking about machine learning model, our primary focus will be on the prediction accuracy itself. So this learning can be basically of two types, just supervised learning and unsupervised learning. So I'm going to explain supervised and unsupervised learning in a very layman's word. So let's assume there is a classroom and there are a lot of students, but there is no teacher. So the students does not know what to learn or where to go or what to do. That will be unsupervised learning. There is no supervision. There is no teacher to supervise the correct behavior or the correct learning. But on the other hand, supervised learning is something when there is a teacher and the teacher is constantly telling the students what to do or what is the right action. That will be supervised learning. So you can see that we have written label data, predict outcome, no labels, find hidden structure. So if we have a data that consists of certain x values, and depending on those x values, we are trying to predict some y values, supervised learning would be some where we have some instances where for similar x's we have the y's, and we are trying to learn from those instances and employ our model to some unseen instances and see that how good we did. That is supervised learning. But for unsupervised learning, there are no y's available. So we are only given x's and we are trying to find some hidden structures between those data and trying to cluster them together or come up with some kind of. Yeah, I'm sorry guys, I think I had some internet issues and I got disconnected. So basically what I was explaining is the different learning algorithms, different types of learning algorithms. First is supervised and unsupervised. So all the learning algorithms that Divas will explain after this will be mostly supervised learning. So supervised learning can be divided into three main parts. First is the linear, next is tree-based, and last is non-linear. So you can see there is a equation written as y is equals to b0 plus beta 0 plus beta 1 x1 plus beta 2 x2, and there is another written as y equals to beta 0 beta 1 x1 plus beta 2 x2 plus beta 1 1 x1 square plus beta 2 x2 square. So one might think that the second equation is a non-linear model, but it is not. That is because the linearity or the non-linearity comes only when there is power on unknown variables. Here, the unknown variables in this equation are the betas, not the x's, because we already have the x and we are trying to predict y. In order to predict y, we need the beta zeros or a function that aggregates the x and gives us the y. So as long as there is no power on the coefficient, it will still be classified as a linear model. So the examples of a typical linear model would be linear regression, logistic regression, ridge regression, least absolute shrinkage, and selection operator or lasso. Oh, I'm really sorry. So was it like this the whole session, or did I stop sharing now?
I think that was only for the moment that you disconnect.
Oh yeah, right. So I might have forgot to share it again. It's visible now, right?
Yeah, yeah, we
Okay,
can screen now.
great. Um, so like I was saying, so I'll just repeat whatever I said again. So you can see that in the types of supervised learning, there are basically three types of supervised learning. First is the linear, next is tree-based, and non-linear. So under the linear section, we have two equations written. First is y is equals to beta 0 plus beta 1 x1 plus beta 2 x2. And the next is beta 0 plus beta 1 x1 plus beta 2 x2 plus beta 1 x1 square plus beta 2 x2 square. So one might intuitively think that this second equation is of nonlinear type, or maybe it should be categorized as nonlinear supervised learning. But that is not the case. That is because, like I mentioned before, x1 and x2 values are already known to us. And what we are trying to do is we are trying to predict the y's, the x's. So that's why this whole supervised learning gives us the values of these betas, or in layman's word, this gives us a way to aggregate all our x's and come up with a y. Since our powers are all on known variables, so here the unknowns are beta zeros, beta 0, beta 1, beta 2, beta 1, 1, and beta 2, 2. As long as there is no nonlinearity in the coefficients, the model will still be considered as a linear model. That's why both of these instances are linear model. And some of the examples of linear models are this: linear regression, logistic regression, ridge, and lasso regression. And let's talk about nonlinear models now. So you can see y is equals to e to the power beta x1. So this is basically a nonlinear model. Why is that? We can write it as y is equals to e to the power beta into x1. So e to the power beta is a nonlinear function. So that's why any model that we want to employ in order to find a function like this, we have to employ a nonlinear model. Certain examples of nonlinear model would be neural networks, support vector machine, and support vector regression. And apart from linear and nonlinear models, there are tree-based models, such as regression and classification trees and random forest. So that will be all to introduction to data science and analytics from my part. So thank you for listening to me for so long. I hope you have learned something out of it. If not, then I think that I have able to give you some information about it. So now Divas will take over and Divas will talk about introduction and implementation of different machine learning models.